I think you restarted it. Do you remember you said it and then you were like, I'm going to redo this?
Yeah.
You can redo another one if you want.
Okay. Well, this is me after the episode that we've just had, and I feel a bit exposed and I feel pretty vulnerable because I've had our guest dive into my personal emotional relationship with money and diagnose some of my problems. But yeah, this is an amazing episode with a dear friend of mine, and I really think you're going to enjoy this episode. So yeah, here goes. Welcome back to Loose Change. Thanks, guys. Phone on silent. You ready?
So ready.
You ready?
So ready.
Be professional.
I'm the most professional person.
Be sensible, on point, ready to go. Well, welcome back to Loose Change. On this week's episode, I'm joined by my friend Laura Ann Moore, who is a money mindset expert, financial wellbeing speaker, finance coach, and podcast host of Mind, Money, Soul. And most importantly, she's really good at saving money. And she's here to talk to us about improving our mindset when it comes to saving. Welcome, Laura.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I've been wanting to have you for a while. Why has this taken so long?
No, why is it taking so long? Wait for this moment, that's why.
How have you
It's
been?
going to be gold.
How have you been?
Very good, thank you.
How's your year going?
Up and down. I've learnt a lot this year about myself and my life and my business. It's been a big personal life year, but I've also had a lot of fun. So good year.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. Big year of growth for everyone. I've been hearing.
Everyone. It's really weird, and the year's gone so quick. I'm like, how is it the month that it is? But yeah, a lot of people, even like my housemates, we're like every day. It's like, oh, every day's a school day. It's constant.
Has money been a big part of it?
Money has been a big part of it, actually, in a way of getting used to a change in how I used to feel about money and how I feel about it now, the amount that I'm making compared to how much I was making before, or versus workload, all of that kind of stuff.
Ooh, I feel like there's loads that we can
So
dig into about that. Yeah, loads. You'll probably be helping me a lot more. I think, obviously, we've been friends for a while. I've known you for a while, and you probably came to notoriety, and what you were known for was initially about being someone who was quite good at saving, managed to save quite a bit of money independently as well. I think that's important to say, because when it comes to saving vast amounts of money, some people do get a lot of help, which is fine as well. But you were able to do so independently a couple of times as well, and wanted to share that experience and your journey with other people. But can you tell us a little bit about your savings journey?
Yeah, I think it's wild when I think back on it, because it feels like it's been a really long journey. So when I was 19 to the age of 22, I saved £15,000, and then I saved another 25 grand basically between the ages of 25 to 27. So up until this point, I've saved about £40,000 more now, but that's the notable part. And it honestly started when I'm 30 now. I'm in my 30s.
Same.
30s are the new 20s, if you ask me. I'm having the best time. Anyone listening, if you're coming up to 30, strap in, you're going to have a good time. But yeah, I was 19 and I basically got my first ever full-time job. And the reason I did that is because I didn't want to go to university, even though I got good grades. I was I'm not going to use that. I just want to get into work because I wanted to go to drama school. And for anyone that doesn't know, drama school is £15,000 per year. And I don't come from a family that could give me that level of money. So I was just I need to learn how to do it myself. So I got my first ever full-time job and just went on this absolute mission. And then in the 3 and a bit years, I had the £15,000. I honestly, it's funny when I think back, because I'm I don't know what I thought. That would have just paid for 1 year's tuition. I still had year 2 and year 3, and I would be living in London. So how I thought I was going to live, I don't know, but doesn't matter. And then instead of using it for drama school, I ended up going traveling and spending basically all of it.
Yeah.
And no regrets, not one regret. And then
You went to Australia, right?
I went to Australia, Bali, Thailand, Cambodia, New Zealand, Malaysia. Really fun. So good. And I think what traveling gave me is genuinely priceless.
Yeah.
You cannot, it's intangible. It was so good. It changed me so much as a person. And for me, which started me on my journey, is I had that moment of, I didn't have to pick between traveling and drama school based on which one I could afford.
Yeah.
It was like I had the money. Let's go. So that was good. And then the second part came from I'd come home and I was still not sure what I wanted to do. And I got back. I was really lucky. I got my old job back. Got given a promotion, like decided I wanted to move to London. And I was like, better get saving. And I kind of utilised, you know, the power of wanting to move to London.
Yeah.
Then saved another 25 grand.
So
moved to the big sit.
That's amazing, right? Because I look at that and me at those ages, let's take uni out aside of it, or me sort of like in my teens to early 20s, whilst you were saving 40 grand and then spending it and then saving it again, I was probably spending 40 grand. So I think I had the reverse journey, right?
Which I think is more common.
Yeah.
Can I say.
So I can sit here and be an expert on spending.
Yeah.
I'll tell you how to do that.
Perfect.
which is funny because obviously me and Shaq always joke about this because we've obviously built a platform teaching people how to become confident about money and learning how to sort of join that money conversation. But we always said, like, the reason you should listen to us is because our natural impulse is we're not good with money. We don't have good money habits, and it's because we've made all the mistakes ourselves and then managed to turn it around. So we're the perfect case study to turn things around, right?
You're like, it can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what that story is, from a highlights perspective, it's like, oh, look, here's this girl, she's managed to save loads of money. Great. Like, I haven't managed to do that. Mm-hmm. But what that story probably doesn't tell, which I'd love to get into with you later as well, is there's loads of challenges. Like, there's loads of personal challenges when it comes to your relationship with money, why it is that you managed to save so much independently, how you felt about that money. I think there's a lot of that that we should get into later. But when people hear about £40,000 in savings, right? Everyone's like, oh, like I'm not going to do that anytime soon. So what's the point? I'll start later. Did you wait until you were earning a good amount of money before you started saving? Because let me say from my perspective, like I was kidding myself because I worked in London. I've always had like a decent career, even from my early 20s. And I was like, well, I don't earn enough to like save any reasonable amount of money, so I'll just wait. And were you the same, or did you?
No, I was kind of the opposite. And I was like, because when I got this first full-time job, I mean, this is 11 years ago, but my starting salary was £12,000.
Wow.
When I got it, though, I was like, I'm so rich. I'm a baller. I honestly thought it was so much money because, like, my family didn't really talk about money.
Yeah.
And basically, I worked in a pub at the time. So I was, like, making even less. And I remember there was, like, these 3 locals. And I came in and I was like, guys, I'm leaving. I've got a big girl job. They were like, tell us everything. And I was like, it's for a marketing company. I've got this role. And I'm making 12 grand. And literally all 3 of them were like, that's not a lot of money. And I was like, yes, it is. Like, I really remember us having this big argument over it. But saving was my priority.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as I started that job and I started getting a monthly salary, I was like, I need to be putting some of this away. But I went into that job, obviously, with a certain mindset of like having a goal, what I'm working towards. I didn't think I don't earn enough right now.
Wow.
That didn't come into my head.
So I think there's a big lesson in that because look at like the previous version of myself, for example, who sort of started working. And I remember when I was earning, I'm giving lots away here in terms of like my own negative approach to money previously, but like even at the start when I was earning around 30 grand, I was like, oh, I don't have enough to save.
Yeah.
And you were earning £12,000, and even from then you had been saving a little of what you had, and often.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite an important concept that people overlook, that it's better to start saving however much you can afford, a little and often, and that will go a lot further than waiting and trying to save big chunks of money to catch up.
Yeah, and I think what that teaches you is, regardless of whether it's literally £5 or 50 or 100, it's teaching you the habit.
Yeah.
It's teaching you the concept of I take a portion of my paycheck, whatever that is, and I put it away for my future self, whatever that goal is, even if it changes. And it's kind of like it reaffirms a part of your identity. And I think like when it's so easy to fall into that trap, because not having enough is so subjective. I don't earn enough, I don't make enough. And obviously we have to take into account, like, I lived at home, yes, but I was still paying like bills. I still paid fair way, but it wasn't a huge percentage. Not like when you move to London and it's like a third of your income. But I still had, you know, things to pay for. I had a car, I had all of these things, but it comes down to like the way that you view yourself and the way that you view money. Like, and that just didn't cross my mind because of the way that I was, not the way I was raised, but the whole household in which I was born into. It made me, that's what made me have that mindset around like, some of this has got to be kept for me.
That's so good. Honestly, obviously, when we look at it retrospectively, like, that's so good. And it's funny how much your home situation can influence your relationship with money. It's funny because like my parents, I didn't pay as much notice to it. Because I was like, yeah, whatever. But it's so true, like, because they would say things like, if you can't respect £1, if you can't respect £5, if you can't respect £10, you won't ever be able to properly manage or respect £1,000, £10,000, £100,000 or more. It makes complete sense though.
And I think also, like, because I say a lot, how you manage £10 is how you'll manage £10,000. And people always, like, whenever I do workshops or speak to people in my community, the number one thing that people always say is, I need more money. And it's like, we all want and need more money, but it's like, but what are you being a good house for your money now? Because otherwise you just end up like saying that over and over and over again. And like, where's the end? Where do you stop saying that? Where do you draw the line? Now, obviously, caveat to this, some people really do actually just need more money. But if you are in a position where you have a bit of disposable income to eat out, buy clothes, like just little things, there's definitely enough in there to save, even though it's painful sometimes and like you have to have the discipline. But like, where do you stop saying that? At what point does it shift?
Well, I think you and I needed to have this conversation at this point in my life, which we'll get into later, because I've I don't know what it is, but I agreed to have you really like diagnose my current situation and my relationship with money, because I think there's some hard hitting lessons that I probably need to take as well from this conversation. Is there anything that you're saving towards right now?
So right now, and I've talked about this on my podcast and on my like socials, I have this concept of like achieving my big happy goal.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I've acronymed it. Not that I can ever remember. I'm always like AMBHG. But like basically this concept of what I really care about and value ever since going to Australia is travel. Like, it lights me up in a way that I can't explain.
You and me both. I love to travel.
Right? And it's so funny because when you meet people that don't love to travel, I'm all for like people having their own things, but it's the one thing I'm always like, really? Are you sure? Like, you sure you don't want to give it another go? Like, it's so good. But obviously travel means like
different things to different
people. But like, I came back from Australia before COVID happened. I basically 10 grand of the 25 grand that I'd saved was to go to South America. I had an itinerary, I had a backpack. I hadn't booked any flights, but I was like, I am going. And then COVID happened. So like, this travel bug is still within me. Now I used a huge portion of those savings to set up my business. So like, so cool. But now, what I'm saving towards is being able to basically be able to still have a base in London, but to be able to travel maybe like 3 months of the year. Maybe that's like 1 month every 4 months, or, you know, once a week, or once a week, you know what I mean? Once a month. Whatever it is, I want to be able to travel and still run my business. So what I'm saving towards is like having enough in emergency fund, having enough to like fund some of that, and then having enough in investments that I know that like my money's still growing whilst I'm doing that. So it's like all centered around travel right now. That's
so interesting. And the report that I was telling you about by Coventry Building Society, who are sponsoring this episode, which is Save for Your Sunny Days, they mention how of those surveyed, even though most people realize that there's certain experiences like travel or like sharing like experiences with family and friends and going to like concerts and stuff makes them really happy. Only 9% of people save towards those goals. And well, you're in that 9%, actually saving towards things that make you happy. But so many people, I think we're so either like there's just not enough to be able to think about happiness goals, because you're so fixated on like, I need to save for my emergency fund, I've got bills to pay, which is a very obviously sensible thing to prioritize first, that sometimes we lose sight of some of the things that will bring us joy when it comes to our money. And that's something that I've always benefited from hearing from yourself, that those are things that you prioritize saving towards as well.
And I think like with the big happy goal thing, I talk about what is the big happy goal. It's not the money part, it's not the numbers, it's what is it that I want, and then work backwards so you can then work out the numbers. And it's so funny because people say that those things bring them joy. And I read this book called Die with Zero. It's so good. It's so good.
It's a very thought-provoking title.
It's the book is so thought-provoking in itself. It's got so many good bits, and it talks about this concept of memory dividends. So like when you have an experience, a holiday, doing something with your friends, like an experience as opposed to a thing, not only do you get to enjoy that thing in the moment with the money that you've saved for it or that you've spent on it, but you then have the dividends of getting to retell that story and relive that experience for the rest of your life. So the earlier that you're having these experiences, the longer you obviously can go on to do that. And what happens sometimes is you have people on one end who save and invest everything because they're so scared of like not being financially secure, and then in their younger years they don't have any experiences, they haven't saved for any happiness, it's all been security. And then you get to like 60 or 70 and it's like you don't have the same amount of time, you don't have the same amount of health, you don't want to do the things at 60 that you did want to do at 30. But then if you go the other way and you're only spending and like enjoying in the moment, then obviously you run the risk of having no financial security. So it's like finding that balance. But like for the people that say they're not saving for anything to do with happiness, okay, well, if we think about the rest of your money, like where is it going? Is it that you're like spending too much? Because are those things in the now bringing you joy?
Yeah.
Or is it that you're spending on things right now that like just aren't bringing you joy and you're just doing it just because it's what you've been told or what you're seeing other people do? And it's like really picking even just one goal that you know is going to bring you so much joy, I think is important, both for saving, but then for the actual doing of it, like, and getting to like enjoy your money. That's the bit we don't get taught, and that's what I think is really important, and I think like underpins so much of your saving habits.
Wow, that's so true. I really loved what you said about the memory dividend.
Yeah,
that's
so good.
That's a really good description, because I've spoken about this before, but not as articulately, about when you look back on your years, and when I look back on certain years, I remember it by some travel that I've done, or some experience, some novel experiences. I talk about the idea of introducing novelty in your life, because the novel experiences out of the ordinary routine is what you remember things by. So like it's funny you were saying you wanted to go to South America. I remember 2018 because it was the year that we had was the World Cup, and I just quit the job and I'd got a new job, and I went to Colombia, and it was like we had like a really long summer that lasted until October that year almost, and I just remember that being such a good year, but I don't remember it by the meetings at work that I had, and I don't remember it by I can't really remember what I was doing or what job I had at the time. but I do remember going to Colombia. I do remember the World Cup, and I remember all of these novel experiences. And when I speak about the year and I recount the year, I always talk about those experiences that I had with those memory dividends. Exactly.
Yeah, and it's like, funnily enough, in 2017, I had the opposite year, and I'd been working so hard at this job. Like, I'm talking, I was going in, I was the first one there, I was the last one to leave. I was like working so many hours, and I'd work my way up in the company. I was getting commissions, obviously I was able to save more, so it had a positive benefit. But I really remember getting to kind of like late summer, and I was sat outside the front with one of my friends, and I was like, oh my God, the whole summer's gone, and I haven't done anything. I haven't been really on any holidays. I haven't been to any festivals, any gigs. And I remember really making a conscious choice to be like, if you want to do stuff with your summer, like, you can't just let it fly by you. And it's not that you only do stuff in summer, but I really remember having that moment of like, all I've done is work. I don't have any memories. And like, when it comes to saving, like when we think about like the goals and stuff, especially when it comes to buying property, everybody just gets told in the
Yeah.
UK, buy property. And I think it's amazing. People that save and buy property, like, I absolutely take my hats off to you. But obviously there are so many other ways that you can grow your money. And it's like, you end up missing out potentially on 3-4 years of like so many cool memories and novelty experiences because you were so focused on one goal.
Yeah.
And like, it's questioning, is that your goal or is
Yeah.
it a goal that's been passed on? Because if you're like, all I've ever wanted, like, let's say you grew up in a really like awful household and you were like, all I've ever wanted is my own home. I want to like paint the walls and put my own art up. It's really emotional.
Yeah.
But if you're just like, oh, I need to buy a house. And then you're like, what did you do for the last 4 summers? Nothing. I've got no memes, got no stories to tell. Like, everything is about this one thing. That kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's really important to balance, right?
Yes.
It's balance and like intention. And what you're saying about the memory dividends also sparks something, because travel for some people also, I understand how we're describing it, can be a stretch goal. But the memory dividends, you can also, it's funny because the report that I referenced actually talks about this, like you mentioned, for like saving for gigs and festivals and like sporting events, like shorter term. I say shorter term, but nearer term goals, you kind of get that experience of extended happiness. So it talks about in the report, like when you first commit to going and you purchase a ticket, let's say to a concert, or let's say it's Glastonbury, right? Then
if you could get a ticket.
If you can get a ticket. If you can get a ticket to a festival like Glastonbury or a gig, and then so your joy starts the moment you commit to going, right? And then, no, actually, it starts even earlier. It starts for when you start saving towards that goal.
The anticipation.
Because and then the anticipation begins to build. And then you're saving towards it. You purchase the ticket. And then it's like the lead up to the event. The anticipation continues to build. And then you have the event itself. And then you have this like peak of joy. And then afterwards, you begin to reminisce the experience that you had, and then begin to retell that story. Rather than, let's say, a material impulse purchase, you buy in the moment and it kind of like dissipates after that. But an experience like that, you really do have that upward curve and prolonged joy that you have associated with it, which is really 100%. Really interesting to find out.
Yeah, and I think like you saying about the novelty moments as well, like this idea, I can't remember exactly the concept, but it's this awe is one of the most important things that people should experience to expand their mind, and it falls into the same thing. Me, like my moments of awe where I've had like that are being at gigs, like I went to Glastonbury one time, I got a ticket, like being at different festivals, and that moment where it's like dark, a little bit dark, and you're outside and you're just with your mates and you're dancing and there's fireworks and you're like, this is the best day of my life. Like I feel so naturally high, like this is insane, like that feeling, like
the euphoria.
It's euphoria, and it's like, you know, the concept of blue zones, you know, like people who live, so for anyone that doesn't know, a blue zone is like an area in the world or in a country where they have the most centenarian, so people over 100, and they look at the things that bring them most joy, and one of the biggest things is like experiences and friends.
So community, having a community where you do things with, whether it's as expensive as glamping at Glastonbury or as going to the local pub that has like this little gig on or whatever in between. That thing of like shared experiences with friends and family. Yeah, absolutely.
Priceless.
Yeah, it really is. I've seen that reference before as well. Okay, that's really interesting. So you have this amazing goal that you're saving towards that will bring you joy. What do you call it? Your happy goal.
My big happy goal.
Your big happy goal. So how do you balance? As someone, maybe let's consider you an exemplar, because it sounds like you are. But let's say across your savings goals, how do you balance all the things that you're saving for? Because you are still saving towards your long-term goals. I know you mentioned investments, your rainy day and emergency fund. How do you balance saving across all of those personally?
So for me, I see all of those. So in this instance, I see all of those goals, like saving for an emergency fund, investing, all of that, all lean into the big happy goal. So they are all one. I break it down of like, how much would I like in each pot? I break down to what that looks like on a monthly basis, and that then is my saving number. Now, obviously it does, that's just like a practical way of like looking at it. But the balance, you know, because it doesn't always work out like that, the balance does come down to understanding priorities and also the emotional connection that you like have to it, because there are other things that I feel I've wanted to save towards that aren't just attached to that big happy goal, like just certain things that I've wanted that I've known that I've need to save for. And it comes down to priorities, understanding your own financial values, understanding your own financial goals. Like the way I try to do it is acknowledge that there isn't a perfect balance. There are going to be times in your life where you're going to spend more where you're going to save more, and like mapping it out. A lot of the time I speak with clients or people in my community and they have all these things that they want, but they haven't put any practical part behind it. So then it all just feels like a pipe dream, and they go, oh, I can't balance it, I can't do this. And I'm like, have you sat down and made different pots, named them for each of the things? Have you worked out how long it's going to take to save towards each one? Have you, like, because that is the part that when you show it to your brain what you're working with, even if it feels like a stretch goal or it feels really out of reach, at least you know what you're working with. Then you can find other ways to either bring in more money or find more savvy ways to save, or go, do you know what, I just need an extra year, or whatever it is. And it's that thing of like, you can have anything you want, you just can't have everything you want, and that's okay.
I heard that one. That one landed. Yeah, it's so true.
Do you know what I mean?
This episode is brought to you in partnership with Coventry Building Society, who recently published their new report on financial happiness. Save for your sunny days. The report found that 83% of Brits surveyed believe that sharing experiences like live sports and arena concerts with friends and family made them happier, yet only 9% of those surveyed prioritise saving towards them. We'll be discussing some of the findings in this week's episode, but you can access the full report on the Coventry Building Society website, which is www.coventrybuildingsociety.co.uk. So I wanted to talk to you about something that's important that I often mention in our workshops, but I feel like you're the perfect person to dive into this with, which is about our relationship with money.
My favourite thing.
And I think for a lot of people, they don't realise that our relationship with money is actually much more or entirely emotional rather than rational. And the way I always talk about that and the examples that I give is that we're really susceptible to emotional stimuli. So let's say, for example, you decide that, oh, I'm overspending a little bit. And some people might be able to relate to this. I know when I was younger, this is something that I actually did. I was like, oh, I've overspent a little bit. So I'll look through my subscriptions and I'll be like, oh, I don't need Audible anymore. Or I don't need Spotify, and I'll cancel one of my subscriptions, right? And then I'll save, what, £8 a month, right? And then I really feel like I've done something, right? And then maybe a week later, I'm really tired, right? I'm hungry. I'm bored. I'll go on Uber Eats or Deliveroo and I'll order a £30 takeaway, right? In that moment, I've like out and overspent whatever I thought I'd saved by making that huge sacrifice massively, which is completely non-rational because of a completely emotional decision where I was tired or I was bored. And I think that can manifest in so many different ways and it can scale as well. And that's because we need to fundamentally understand that our behavior with money is actually not rational at all. And it's much more emotional. Have you experienced that yourself? And I guess, what's your understanding of emotional spending, and how does it affect our ability to save?
Yeah, so you're not alone in that. Like, I definitely have experienced it. I think people, when they think about me, that because I'm a money coach, they just assume that I'm like perfect with my money. And as a recovering perfectionist, I'm absolutely not. And my version of that is like letting the pendulum swing, where it's like you go far too the other way, and then I'm like, oh my God, I feel really guilty spending my money. Like, I feel weird about it, and the emotions of that. But then it swings the other way, and like it's a bit like a diet, like binging and then restricting and binging. So then I go the other way, and it's come from that feeling of guilt or like resentment towards saving too much or whatever it is. But like, money itself is just a tool, right? And humans, they don't choose, subconsciously choose what emotion to attach to it. There's kind of like, with the emotional spending part, there's kind of two sides to it. So it's, first of all, what is your relationship to money? And like you say, all of our behaviors, not even just with money, but all of our behaviors come from a place of emotion. And we can choose to use our logic and justify things, but especially the subconscious ones is coming from emotion, money included. So it's like, first off, acknowledging what is your relationship to money? Like, what are your beliefs? Because your belief system about money and about the world, and also about yourself, so your own identity, is going to infiltrate all the decisions that happen with your money. So you have that side, and then on like the emotional spending side, it's obviously, like you said, being hungry, being tired, being bored. They're like I guess, like one layer. And then deeper than that, you have like guilt and shame and resentment and fear and like all of those kind of deep rooted emotions that can impact you. Like, for example, self-worth, the way that you feel about yourself. If you are hating on yourself, like, let's just say you've been on a date and like it didn't go the way that you wanted, and you're feeling lonely and you're like, I'm not good enough, I feel shit about myself, like all of these things, you are more likely to then go it, and you're going to go out and you're going to spend money that actually you don't have. Now, if in addition to that you're not confident managing your money and creating a budget, it's kind of exacerbated and like made bigger because you don't even know what's going on with your money. And then it just becomes this big like cycle, because it's like overspend, you spend more, feel bad about it, end up in the same, like, and it just keeps kind of going down.
Yeah.
So I do think the way that impacts and affects your ability to save is either you don't save at all because you literally don't have enough, because you're spending most of your disposable income, or you are trying to save, like maybe doing the right practical things, but when the emotion takes over, you're dipping into your savings. So you're like taking from your future self, and you're not able to do it consistently. So it's either like it's not happening at all in the first place, or when it is happening, you're not able to stick to it, because saving requires you doing the thing and then sticking at the thing. Yeah, it's kind of like when you want to lose weight, you have to go to the gym to get the body you want, but you then have to maintain it.
Yeah, this is so funny you say that. I was literally just thinking about that right now. The discipline element, right? So emotion and discipline, so behavioral elements. Morgan Housel talks about this in in The Psychology of Money, and he talks about there's a couple of things that you can't really cheat. That being your health and your finances. And it's like, I think he gives the example of someone that goes to the gym and does this incredible workout, and they feel really good, and then they come home and they just have like order a fat takeaway, and then they just like binge on certain calories, and they're like, oh, it's okay, I just worked out, right? But you've just undone
the work.
The discipline comes from doing that and then sticking to eating well, right? And it's like with your money, it's like, oh, I've made loads of money, so which means I can just spend it, right? It's the same kind of behavior and example, right? But the discipline actually comes from, I've made loads of money, but I'm not going to behave like I've had this influx of money, because I'm going to contribute towards my future self instead.
Yes. And the identity part of that is like, I am a saver. So when I'm making loads of money, you then also have to view yourself as someone who saves, because it's all well and good making the money. Like, there are a lot of rich people walking around London that you see wearing Balenciagas, wearing nice stuff, and you're like, they might have a lot of money, but their mindset is they're trying to prove they can afford it, and they're showing it off, or maybe they're an emotional spender, but they're not like managing their money and doing the discipline part. And like, James Clear said this thing, it was on his newsletter, which is like the best newsletter in the world, and he said, discipline is what you do on the hard days. And I love it, because it's the same. Like, when I'm feeling good, it's easy to wake up and go to yoga and do my workout and have a salad. On the days where I feel low, it's like, oh, I don't want to do that. That's when you should do it. Same with your money. Like, the days where you're struggling emotionally are the days where you actually got to grit down more and be like, don't let this day be the thing that undoes my financial progress. This is where I'm being shown an opportunity of like, how can I manage my own emotions? And I think humans, sadly, aren't taught in life or in school how to sit with their emotions and manage their emotions, and also like trust that emotions pass through you. Like, so if you're having a bad feeling or having a bad day, that will shift. You don't have to medicate it with spending all the time.
That's so true. And it's funny what you're saying about people like designer clothes and stuff, material stuff. And again, to reference Morgan Housel, he talks about this. He says, when he uses the example of like cars, right? And it could be like, I don't know, something which is an expensive item to own. And he says, all you actually know, right, about that person that, let's say, has an £80,000 car, or has like a £5,000 jacket, or a 15 grand watch, right? Is you have evidence of money they've spent. You don't have evidence of money that they have. And that it's important to sit with that for a bit, because he also then goes on to actually like explain this example with a real life experience that he had, where I think in a job that he went to. I don't know if it was Morgan himself, but he shared an experience of someone and who basically pulled up in like a Porsche 911, really expensive car, and he'd assumed, he was like, oh my god, this man's making so much money, he must be so rich, because he has this car, which must mean he has an even nicer house, which must mean he's earning loads of money, because how else is he going to have all of that? And then I think like a couple of months later, he pulled up in a different car, which was a very steady Eddie normal car. It didn't have the Porsche anymore. And he asked the guy, where's your car gone? He goes, oh, I defaulted on my payments. I couldn't afford it anymore. And suddenly the glass had shattered of this like perception that he had of this person, because he had this one thing, but the only evidence that he had was money that he'd spent. He had zero evidence of what money this person actually has. All of that was constructed around this perception. And that exists for everyone. I think I've said before, because I had a period, obviously we're on camera a lot, and I had a period where people would be like, I probably spent a bit of money on clothes, and someone mentioned that, someone in the comments was like, oh look, he's telling us how to save money and he's spending X amount on this top. Shaq found that hilarious, so I obviously stopped doing that. And then I'd get comments like, oh, like, you must be so rich and this, that. And I'd be like wincing, because I'd be like, no, I don't feel rich. And actually, if you think I'm rich, I'm just wearing all my wealth. You're
seeing it.
And you have no idea, like, because you think I have so much based on what you're just seeing right now. And I think that is pervasive in society. Like, we have a spotlight effect on ourselves, but then we construct perceptions of other people based on very limited evidence, which is quite destructive now because of social media and everything.
Well, the phrase is, or for that, is wealth is silent. You don't see what somebody is holding on to. Not nowadays. Like, before you could, because you'd see what they literally had, like they'd have loads of goats in the garden or whatever. But now you don't see that. And I think in society, I think it's getting better, but in society, like, saving's not as cool. You have to be in circles with people that view saving and investing as cool, right? When I saved that £15,000, I kept it a secret from everyone. When I went to Australia, no one knew how much money I had. They just knew I was like, bye, one-way ticket, see you later. And it wasn't until I got home, couple of months on, one of my friends was like, how much did you actually have saved? Because most of my journey in Australia and like traveling, I didn't have a job. I just was like living my best life by the pool. My two best friends would go to work and then we'd like do stuff. I literally only had to get a job in like the last 6 weeks just to afford the last bit. And I was ashamed of it. Right. I was like, that's not cool. Look at me saving my money. Like, and I think in society, people try to control other people's perception of them by, instead of being a kind person and using like soft skills and emotional intelligence, and it's more focused on what can you buy, what have you got, what can you show you've got. And that is it's such a slippery slope. And I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to buy nice things and wanting to look after yourself, but it's that thing of like, am I doing this for me because it makes me feel better, which means I show up in my job better, or am I actually doing it to the detriment of my finances and my like saving progress, but also because I'm trying to get other people to view me in a certain way, because that is empty. That makes you feel empty. It doesn't satiate your soul.
100%. Wealth is what you don't see. It really is. Exactly. And it's troubling that society isn't constructed that way.
I know.
But it's an important reminder, like, wealth really is what you don't see. And I've had, obviously I'm 30 now. You're 30 now. But I've had like multiple moments where I've spoken to friends or peers and who are close enough to share with me like their financial situations. And it's the people that you don't expect who quietly have been chipping away and like acquiring wealth. And it does really make you think that wealth is what you don't see. So don't get caught up in the traps, basically, the financial trappings of modern society.
And that is it, because we're constantly marketed to every single day. So we are not only fighting against just ourselves of wanting to like spend money, but we're also fighting against people that are being paid loads of money to be amazing social media like marketers. Like, people literally have jobs to convince you to spend your money. So you're battling against that. And you get better at knowing when to spend and when to save, the more in touch you get like with yourself and with your relationship with money and what money can do for you. And that's where like a big one comes in, I think, is like understanding how you view wealth. Like, what does wealth mean to you? Because I'm a big believer that like money isn't the end goal. Money is like the vehicle that takes you there.
Yeah.
And it's gonna like, there are gonna be points where, like I said before, where you save and spend more or less in different points, but going along the journey, it's not just about dying with the most amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's also not about thinking, oh, anything could happen and I'm safe in my job right now, so I'm just going to...
Yeah.
So the balance bit is like personal to you, but you have to look at it and be really honest with yourself.
Yeah.
You cannot, like you said, like Morgan says, you cannot cheat your finances.
Yeah, you really can't. That's so helpful, and I think it's an honest take, and I hope it's disarming for people listening as well and watching. For us to be like open and honest with ourselves, at least, with our money and our relationship with it. So, what can we do to stop emotional spending and actually grow our savings?
So I think it's really important so I always talk about this concept of when you're trying to stop emotional spending, first of all, you need to know that that's even happening. But keeping a money diary is so powerful. So when you spend money, you don't just write down, like, you know, I went to Zara and spent £100. You write down how you were feeling when you spent.
Wow. Okay.
You attach the emotion to the habit.
So this is new, because I'll tell you where I've done this before. I do that. I've done this with my fitness goals.
Yeah.
And I had a period in my life where I got into incredible shape, and I had a fitness coach, and we did something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I've recently started again of like keeping a bit of a log of like how I ate, how I slept, and how it made me feel, and not just looking at my weight and having a healthy relationship with it all. But I'd never thought about it with money.
Yeah. So what you start to see is patterns of like, I was stressed at this point. I just had a really stressful day at work and I went and bought something that I didn't need, or, you know, whatever it is, like, and you can start to identify what your triggers are.
Yeah.
You can start to identify like, what is it that's going to push me over the edge and put me into this like position. You might look at it and there's really clear like triggers. It's stress, it's boredom, it's loneliness, it's this. Or you might be like, that is a mess. I feel all ranges of emotion, like, and that in itself is okay, but you start to put the building blocks in place of like, what can I do when I start to notice that I'm feeling that emotion? The problem with modern day society is that people aren't being mindful when they're not in touch with their bodies and their emotions. They're just going through the motions. They're getting up, they're going to work, they're doing all the things, and they're on autopilot. And most of us are on autopilot like most of the day anyway. So it's quite tiring when you start to like shift your relationship with money, because you have to spend more time in your conscious brain. But just noticing the little things. And then over time, you can be like, okay, I know when I get stressed, I'm more likely to go spend money. So what can I do at that moment that doesn't involve spending money, but that can move me through that state?
Okay.
Like, what do I need while this passes?
Okay.
And it sounds so like simple and basic, but sometimes it really is like a call with a friend, or like a hobby. Like, I started DJing recently, and it's so fun. You saw my skills. It brings me so much joy. Now, obviously, I had to invest in the equipment, but like in that moment, am I going to pull out my phone and scroll on ASOS, or shall I pull out my decks and just for an hour just sit and play around? Like, the way it shifts my energy is wild. So like, you have the emotional part, and then on a more practical like level, it's literally putting friction between you and spending. Like, if you're like, I really need to find a way to stop, putting friction so that like before you hit pay, especially if it's online, because the thing about online shopping is the dopamine release is higher because of the anticipation. So finding a way to stop yourself in those tracks. And then most of the time you end up forgetting about the purchases, or not even wanting it, or thinking logically once you're out of the emotional state, like, I definitely don't need that like 20th pair of trainer. You're able to actually think about it more logically.
That's so interesting. So keep a money diary, have a distraction that brings you joy. Is there anything else that you do that you find helps you stop emotional spending? Or let's say those things help you stop. Is that what do you do to then make sure that you're contributing that money towards your savings? Yeah.
So when it comes to savings, I really like having an emotional connection to your goals is really important. If you don't feel any motivation or like emotion towards that, the motivation to like save and keep your savings in there is going to be so much lower, because it's like, I don't actually care about that thing. So when I was obviously planning to go to drama school, I honestly was so thought I was going to be like the next big actress. It was such a big thing for me. The emotion of wanting to save for that was higher than what I thought I was going to get from spending something in the moment. You have to find that thing. Now then there might not be something on that level, but like to be able to save, you want to know that you feel really excited about what you're working towards, and that you understand your values when it comes to finances. Like, how do you actually like to spend your money?
Yeah.
So then when you do the practical things of being like, right, I'm going to like, I've got paid, I'm going to pay myself first, I'm going to put money in my savings, I don't want to touch it. Being able to like stop yourself from going in there is little things like having the pot named as the thing that you're really excited about. I love visualizing. I think visualization is so powerful, and visualizing yourself doing that thing so that when you wake up in the morning, like you do it in the morning, you wake up and start your day, it's already at the start of your brain. So you start your day off on the right foot and you're telling your brain what to look for. When it comes to like this idea of having a savings goal, obviously an emergency fund, it's not, no one's like super excited about saving that, but you can lean into the emotional side of like, okay, for the last 6 months, I've been having sleepless nights because I've been stressing about the fact that I don't have any money. I'm still going out and spending, but you can see like the other side. So it's like being motivated away from pain. So the towards pleasure bit is the exciting savings goal, but being motivated away from pain is this idea of like, I don't want to have those sleepless nights. I don't want to have to worry if I'm going to be able to pay my bills. Like, I think there was this stat that says like, a third of Brits in the UK say that if they lost their main source of income, they wouldn't be able to cover 1 month of like living expenses.
Scary, man.
Which is crazy. Yeah. So like that alone, to think I'm buying myself a peace of mind, like the emotional side of like what that looks like, it comes with time. Repeating it over and over, re-reminding yourself of that, re-visualizing, reconnecting to it. And if you're really struggling, I think there's probably like something deeper going on like a relationship with money kind of like basis.
Do you think it's important for people to have specific goals that they're saving towards?
If I had to pick yes or no, I would say yes. I think there's a grey area because saving just for something that you don't know what it is better than not saving at all. Like one of the biggest things that people say to me is the reason I'm not saving is because I don't have anything to save towards. And I say, I think you need to dig deeper. Everybody in life wants something.
Yeah.
Even if that something is a comfortable life and 1 holiday a year, or whether it's like, I want to do all these, quit my job and go traveling. Like everybody has something. And usually it comes down to this idea of people not believing that they can actually have it, or being scared of the work that it's going to take to get there. So they just don't do it. So it's like, dig deeper on what you actually think you want. And I'm a big believer that like you can have, like you could achieve anything. Like if it's in your brain and it is a desire, you can go after it. Whether it takes a year, whether it takes 10 years, like that time is going to pass anyway.
Yeah.
So that leans into the whole like little and often, but I think it helps if you have a goal that you feel excited by.
I like that. How much money do you think that people should be saving if they can afford to? Is there a science to it?
So I don't think there is like a clear science, because I'm a big believer that personal finance is personal for a reason. There's stats that show in the UK, like the average household savings account has about £17,000 in it.
Wow. Okay.
But then you've also got the flip side of like a third of Brits don't even have any savings.
Yeah.
So like the range is wide. But I think the worst thing you can do is compare yourself to other people of like how much I should be doing.
Yeah, got you.
The best thing you can do is like sit down with your finances and be like, okay, what am I working with? What would it look like if I save this much in 5 years? What would it look like if I save this much? Like just play around with it. And I do think if you're someone who's listening to this and you're like, I'm not a numbers person, there are online calculators that can do that for you. And for me, when I look at the number, that a bigger number after like, oh wow, if I put away £200 a month, that could get me X, Y, and Z in the future. And that's where the emotional part come in. But I do think, I don't think there's a right amount that you should save, but I definitely think something is important.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, and especially to understand that personal finance is personal, and comparison is probably unhelpful, because everyone's circumstances are so unique, individual. People have different responsibilities as well. This next bit I'm sort of approaching apprehensively, but nervous, excitedly, and I want to see if you can get me to get into the mindset of a saver or someone that's sensible. Because
Cut out.
yeah, it's hilarious because, you know, I run a brand called Millennial Money. But I think I have a funny relationship with money, which is broadly positive, but it's not always sensible. I know we've spoken about this before. I have like loads of good influences when it comes to money, like from my parents, in that that I think I went viral for saying something like, hold money in your hands and not in your heart, and like be which is, I guess, looks at money on a much more spiritual level as well.
Yeah, I love that.
But I don't know that I always practically approach my finances sensibly. So I think I fall into the trap of being like, well, I've got this lifestyle and this taste. I'm just going to have to make loads to upkeep, right?
Yeah. My first question would be like, what do you view though as being sensible with money? Like, is that, what do you view as that?
As being sensible?
Yeah, like what does sensible look like?
So I think like being consistent in like money that I'm contributing towards my future self, I think meets like an early criteria of sensible, right? And but when I think for how much money I make, and I'll be open, like where I'm very grateful for like where I'm in my career, in my business and stuff, where I'm not making huge amounts, but like it is a significant amount compared to like what I thought I'd need, right? But I wouldn't say that my money habits and behaviors have compounded in the same way, right? Because then I have friends and I know people who have achieved as much as me financially, earning significantly less, right? And that's fine as well. That's amazing. But like, why?
Why? Why have you done that and I haven't?
Yeah.
So the way that your relationship with money right now is that you are more of a spender?
But I guess so, but like it's not, I don't even spend on anything crazy. I don't buy a lot of stuff for myself, I don't think. I think where I've got to is that when I spend, I almost, it's going to make me sound bad. It's not as crazy as it seems, but like I don't look as much. I'm just like, okay, yeah, I'll buy that.
Do you mean not look at the price tag, or you just don't shop
like
around?
I don't shop around, or like I don't hesitate as much to spend money, right? But I wouldn't be shopping anywhere crazy anyway.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't be like spending thousands on something,
Yeah.
right? But like I might go somewhere and it might be a bit more expensive than I would have liked, and I'll be like, oh, I'm here now.
Yeah.
I can probably afford it, and I'll spend it anyway. Or like I'm just very casual with my spending.
Yeah.
But not to the point that it gets me in trouble. And I think that's the issue, because I know I'm not going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
I'm just spending.
So you feel like the stakes are low because you're like, it's casual.
But then at the same time, I'm like, I could hit certain financial goals much sooner if I wasn't like that.
What are your financial goals?
Oh, no.
You don't have to give the numbers, but like...
No, I can give the
numbers.
Okay. Well, I don't know, because again, and this will tell you about how blasé and casual I've become, because there was a point where I was like, oh my God, if I could have 10 grand saved.
Yeah.
Yeah. And no debt and 10 grand saved.
Yeah.
And then I reached that and I was like, oh my God, if I could have 100 grand. I haven't reached that, like, but do you know what I mean? It's just I've just pushed it further down the line. Like, I didn't know why I wanted 10 grand. Why do I want 100 grand saved now? Do you know what I mean? It's just so casual. Like, that's why I say those numbers, because I'm like, the 10 grand seemed like this crazy thing to me at one point. And then it became so like obsolete.
Yes.
Like, and then now it just, for no reason at all, I've constructed this 100K number for no reason. Like, it just seems like I'll be okay once I have 100 grand. That's what I thought about the 10 grand, by the way. I was like, once I have 10 grand saved, I remember when I look back now, once I have 10 grand saved, I'm fine. I'm set. I'm going to be safe. I'm going to be secure. Now I'm like, once I have 100 grand, I'm safe. It's like kind of seeking safety or security in some way
Yes.
with this number.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know where that comes from.
What do you feel like if I said, what is your biggest fear with money?
Yeah.
What would you say?
Running out.
Running out. So like with the 100 grand goal, like it's arbitrary, right? It's just a number.
Mm-hmm.
You have to put meaning behind that.
Yeah.
Right? So if we, in an ideal world, okay, once you've got 100k saved, I will feel those feelings that you thought you were going to have, obviously when you had 10k and then we're going to have 100k, like you can already create those feelings now.
I needed to hear that.
You can already create those feelings now. You don't have to hit that number to feel a certain way.
Yeah.
And it's the same with money, but it's the same with like career, like when I get this job, when I get this thing.
Yeah.
And what's happening is what I'm hearing is that there's a level of like beating yourself up for being so casual with money because you want to get to this 100k goal, and maybe other people who are on less money than you have maybe already hit it or whatever. So it's like you need to reframe this idea of what the 100k means to you and why you even want it. And I think when you maybe put emotion behind it, it's probably going to be likely that you'll hit it easier, but also you can change your relationship like with spending. Question: what do you actually like? How do you actually just feel about money though, in general?
That's a really interesting question. And it's weird because I should know, but my feelings towards money is it's just a tool, right? It's a tool that can provide safety, can give you choices. I wouldn't say I'm like super attached to it. I wouldn't say I'm definitely not a hoarder. I don't hoard money. I do save and invest, obviously. But I do that because I know it's a sensible thing to do. It's something that I'm like, I teach people to do. I strive towards myself. But I recognize that I'm like distancing from like, why? You know? It's like, it's for a future which I haven't fully like mapped or planned, right? For example, I have like a diversified portfolio which includes my savings, right? And like I have money that I put away for a much longer time, and I have like liquid savings as well, which I can access really easily, and I have like more medium to long term investments as well. And that's like, I should just keep growing that. And then, but I've kind of reached the point where I'm like, my life will start when I have 100k, which is ridiculous.
Interesting.
Which is ridiculous, right? And because at the same time, by the way, it's not like I'm sitting there waiting to get to 100k because I spend loads of money, I do loads of things. But I don't know why I've constructed this relationship with this figure.
And when you say you feel like your life is going to start, what do you think would change?
Nothing. It's so stupid because it's like I'm going to have that 100k just like it's going to become this net.
Yeah.
That's going to be there and with no plans to dip into it. Actually, I've listened to a podcast that you were on, which you had a similar thing with the first amount of money that you saved when you first dipped back into it when you went traveling, right?
Yes.
And you felt really weird about it.
So weird.
And I don't know if I'm creating that because I'm just putting money away, which I kind of have no plan to utilize or no immediate plan to utilize. And I don't know whether that's a good thing, because then money that I'm making as well and I'm spending on things that I'm happy to spend it on, I'm sort of seeing it as like, I'm really happy I'm doing this, but am I taking away from the money, the bottomless pit that I should be creating here?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. So it's like this idea of like, you have this goal which you've created for yourself and you set this standard for yourself. You don't necessarily know what it's creating except some level of security.
Yeah.
And then over here you're like enjoying your money, like casually spending it, having a nice time, but like the little bit at the back of your head is
it's
like,
so bipolar.
but you could be doing this. I think, okay, so first, I think you're not alone I know you're not alone in that because I speak to people all different levels of like net worth that have that. This idea of having this pot of money, obviously I think when you're in the financial world, you're surrounded by people that have insane amounts of money and are growing their monies in crazy ways. But also, like, when you get to 100K, that's what you can have in investments, and it will just grow and grow and grow, and you'll be secure and da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
But there is a level of life, that is unpredictable. Like, that's just how it is.
Yeah.
And I think, like, it's great that you have this, but I think you need to change the relationship with what that 100K means to you. Because if you're like, this is what that looks like, or this is what it will give me in the future, as opposed to just like, yay, 100K is going to help with the spending. But I think there's a lot of like shaming yourself.
Yeah, there is. I've
around
noticed that.
Both parts.
And some limiting beliefs, which just I feel like.
Yeah. What if I said though, what would you say your limiting belief is around money?
All right, this is going to sound crazy. So
No, nothing's crazy.
Because I've always worked since I've graduated. I've always had a career, and added to that, for the last almost 5 years, I've also had a business.
Yeah.
Right. So I've like made money in all kinds of ways, and I actually had businesses at university as well. But I have this weird feeling that like one day the tap's just going to switch off and I won't be able to do anything, and the tap's just going to switch off.
Oh.
Do you know what I mean? And it's insane because when I say that to my friends, they're like, "Are you joking? Like, why do you think like that?" And it's so funny because I know we've spoken off air as well about within a household how siblings can have different attitudes with money. Yeah. My siblings, definitely my brother, he has such like broad, the opposite almost of that fear. He's like, by some way, I'm gonna definitely always make money and make loads of it, which I love and I admire, and I hope that nurtures within him as well. And I kind of have that as well inside me. Like practically, I know that about myself as well. But then at the same time, there's this like little voice which is like, "Oh, what if the tap turns off?" It's so funny because I remember, on slight tangent, comedians Dave Chappelle, Kevin Hart, and Chris Rock speak about this, where they're like, they have this, they're at the peak of, they've like gone past the peak of their careers, right? They're hugely successful, so wealthy, and they say that every day of their lives, they feel like someone's just gonna pop in, knock on the door, and be like, the game's up. This was all a joke. You need to pack your bags and leave this life. And they have that still now.
Interesting.
So it's weird because obviously mine's on a very different scale where I'm like, oh, what if the tap just turns off?
Yeah. Yeah. I have so many things to say about this. Okay. First thing that I would say is like, first of all, like on, I guess, like a more positive like aspect, you have actually already provided evidence for yourself that you can make money in a range of ways. You've been in society in a very changing world, like tech-wise, industry-wise, like so many things, and you've found different ways to make money. You have a skill, which is your career. You have a skill, which is your business. And how would the tap turn off? Like, what does that actually look like?
I know it's as abstract to me and crazy as it sounds as well, but then it kind of is like there's a voice that exists that says that. And
have you been in a situation or like had a memory or an experience where that's happened for someone? Like you've seen that?
No.
Or had like something that like that yourself?
Yeah, I'm trying to think whether...
It doesn't have to be in a financial capacity. It could just be, I don't know, anything.
Yeah, that's interesting actually. Possibly. It must come from somewhere. I don't know whether it's like eldest child, eldest sibling, feeling the burden of responsibility that might not even exist, like extra burdening of responsibility that might not exist, to be like, oh, you need to always be thinking about, like overthinking almost.
I'm an eldest child.
Oh, is it?
Well, I'm the eldest daughter.
Yeah.
I get that vibe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But also, sometimes because that links to your biggest fear, right? I said, what's your biggest fear of money? And you were like, not having enough, basically. And that ties into this idea of it stopping and you not having enough to do the things that you want to do, especially because you're like, I feel like I have expensive taste. So it's not like you're going to want to drop down to being frugal and be like, I've got to live off of smaller amounts. But sometimes there is a reason why you have a certain fear, and like you might have to dig deeper for that. Like, where do I feel like that's come from? But sometimes it hasn't always come from someone. It is really abstract, and it's not always logic that you have to put behind it. It's just the emotional thing of creating security for yourself. knowing that you have people around that would support you, knowing that you trust yourself to find ways to make money, and the fact that I know you said you're not at 100k, but like even close to that.
I've just realised where I have had a weird relationship with money fester before. There was a period. Wow, I just remembered. So I think
light bulb moment.
There was a period, and this is when I wasn't really like. This is before I'd like taken care of my finances. When I like first moved into the city, and well, as in like moved out and like started my career in the city, and I hated my job at the time. This was my early 20s. Hated my job, but I didn't feel like I could quit because I'd be like, oh my god, how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to like pay my bills? And that meant that I stayed in a job that I hated for like 2 years more than I should have done. And that, I remember that feeling of like forcing myself through pain because I didn't know how I was going to meet, because I didn't have a good like financial health or relationship with my money at that time. I just pushed myself through it and being like, oh no, what am I going to do if I don't have a job? I need to just stay, you know? Whereas obviously knowing what I know now, I should have just been like, no, obviously not. You'll be able to get another job. You'll be able to give yourself some more time. All will be well.
Yeah. At that point when you had that job, were you managing your finances poorly? Like weren't saving, weren't investing?
Got myself into debt. Whenever I saved, dip back into it. Yeah. Completely the opposite of what I am now.
So like the way in which you experienced that belief systems that you could have created about your own capabilities financially and what can happen out in the world, like this idea of feeling like trapped, like I have to be here because I need
That's
money.
what it was, feeling trapped.
But now you're older and now you've taught yourself all these different things, even though, because there's no rule book around money or like this is exactly what you should or shouldn't do. You're in a position, you know, like an amazing position. You've got a good paying job, you've got a business, you've got investments, you're also able to spend, like, or if we look at it on paper, like doing so well, regardless of other people your age or whatever. But this idea of like, you've been burnt before, I've been trapped before. What if that happens again? But like, you're a different person now. And that's like, people change and grow all of the time. And you're a very growth-minded person. Like, I feel like I know that about you. And it's seeing that version of like, okay, that version of me, if the tap turned off, it would be hell because I didn't have anything saved and I didn't have the financial like behaviors I needed. But this version of me now, it's like rebuilding that strength with who you are now as opposed to that past version of you. Because it's like, I do have the capabilities to make money and save money. And maybe I could save a bit more. Maybe I could invest a bit more. But at the same time, I also don't want to be trapped in a job just working to save and invest. I want to be able to casually spend. Yeah. Like you've taught yourself those things.
Yeah. Wow.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, I've never seen it that way, to be fair. I just never really like forced myself to sit and think about it.
Yeah. And people don't.
It's weird. A 5-minute conversation with you and I've been like, okay. There's some financial traumas that I needed to fix.
Every time we have an experience in life, regardless of whether it's related to money, whether it has a heightened emotion, good or bad, it gets stored within our subconscious. If it really like eats away at us, that's where chronic pain can come from as well. Fascinating. But it gets stored within us. And sometimes it's so deep, like we don't remember some of these things sometimes until you sit and either get questioned by someone or journal. Journaling is so amazing. Not writing on your phone, not writing on a computer, writing down with paper. But it's going to be stored somewhere. And whatever that emotion is, usually that experience has taught us something. But the problem with that is when it's a belief, it's subjective because it's not the way the world works. And that's what we have to remind ourselves. Like I'm a big believer that we aren't our thoughts. Yeah. So those little niggling thoughts that you're having, it's like, it's good to acknowledge them and be like, where's that come from? But what do I need to be telling myself now? What do I need to be showing now? And what is my identity now? Or what would I like it to be? So like this idea of like, I'm not sensible with money, I'm a casual spender. Like have you actually sat and thought, what does a good relationship with money look like? And how far away on the point system, like steps am I from being there? Because you might actually not be that far off in regards to what your ideal relationship with money is anyway, but it feels bigger because of the things you've like told yourself. And then you also have the the opposite of the paradox of the fact that from a young age your parents did teach you good stuff. So it's like this weird thing of like, if I've been taught good stuff, why do I then feel so disconnected from it? Because I do believe it, but then there's something on an emotional level. But it's they can all coexist within us.
Yeah, it's mad that you should be a therapist. There's like loads that has just like resurfaced that I'm realizing, which has provoked a lot of thoughts. That's mad. Yeah, that's crazy. But I think
here is done.
No, actually, you don't understand. I think I can see how rethinking your mindset and relationship with money can really impact your outcomes.
And to add to that, it's never about the money.
Yeah.
It's about how we feel about ourselves,
how
we feel about our lives. And like me touching on this bit about identity, wherever our identity is of ourselves, conscious or subconscious, that's what our behavior aligns with, regardless of the things that you tell yourself. So, that classic thing where you're trying to, I always use like fitness as an example because it's such a good comparison, but like you're feeling sluggish, you're feeling low, and you're like, I need to start working out and being healthy. And that night when you feel awful, when you're lying in bed and you're like, tomorrow I'm getting up at 8 a.m. and I'm going to the gym today. 8 a.m. comes, you snooze, and then you get annoyed at yourself. You haven't identified yourself as someone who is a fitness person. You've been telling yourself you're trying to work up to that point. If you wake up and go to the gym one day, you are a fitness person. If you save £10, you are a saver. And it's like telling yourself these things around what version of myself do I want to be? And that's the power of language, and the way that we talk to ourselves is so important.
Wow, that's so important. I love that. I guess some takeaways then from all of the many things that we've discussed is certainly on like improving our own relationship with money and improving our money mindset. I think what I've learned from you in the last 10 or 15 minutes especially is that not to believe in the fictions that we create about ourselves, and to really rethink why we think certain things about or what we've constructed about a figure or a number when it comes to our money. When it comes to your savings, save little and often, as early as you can afford to. Save for things that bring you joy, your sunny days as well as your rainy days. And comparison is the thief of joy. It's not helpful to compare because everyone's circumstances are so individual. Some really amazing takeaways. This has honestly been, I'm not even joking, probably the episode that I'm going to benefit from the most.
Love that
of all of the interviews that I've done. But one of the ways that we like to end Loose Change is that we ask our guests if there's anything that they'd like to share with our audience. It can be something silly, it can be a book, it can be something that you've learned recently, but would you like to share any parting loose change with our audience?
So I mean, I guess the thing that I have been living by recently is really leaning into the art of detachment, big time. And I love fun and play, but sometimes I let other stuff, attachment to money, career, all of those things get in the way, and they can both coexist. But like this idea of like not attaching ourselves to certain things is so freeing and liberating. And on an emotional level, over the past few weeks, definitely my emotions have been so much more stable, I guess, and like comfortable. And even when it has swung the other way, it hasn't lasted because I haven't had as many shackles on me. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I just thought I'd share that and say I think if people can learn the art of detachment, I think people would be a lot happier.
I love that. Well, thank you for joining us on Loose Change. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you And to everyone listening, I hope you've benefited from this episode as much as I have. We'll share all the details of the Coventry Building Society report in the details. And Laura, would you like to tell us your handles? So where can people find you?
Absolutely. And thank you for being so open and vulnerable during my diagnosis. I appreciate it. So I'm on Instagram, which is at Laura_Ann_Moore. I'm on TikTok, which is just Laura Ann Moore. And then my podcast is Mind, Money, Soul. And I'm also on LinkedIn for the corporate people.
So many places to find you.
I
And
know.
we'll share all of that in the details of the episode as well.
Thank you.
But thank you, and thanks for listening, guys.
Bye.
Bye.